Hey guys, this is Tombox, and today I have the honor of introducing to you all one of the most impactful strategy in the Infinite Forbidden, Fiendsmith. This strategy is going to be competitively most impactful. You play Snake Eyes, Rescue, Ace, Labyrinth, Chimera, or even you Bell. It's going to flow very, very smoothly in your decks. And I highly suggest you guys to watch this one all the way to the end, because it's going to talk about the cards, it's going to talk about the rarities, and it's got all the information you're going to want to know. So make sure you guys hit that like button, hit subscribe, ding that notification bell, and let's go. The first card we're going to be revealing is going to be Fiendsmith Engraver, the namesake of the deck, the only main deck monster, and it is the 1CC, the one card combo. Now, one design feature about Fiendsmith is that whenever they activate their effects, often they have an effect where they have to put back light fiend monsters from the graveyard or banish back into the deck, which allows them to kind of go full circle on recycling the resources, which is going to give them a pretty good grind game. And we kind of already know one deck that does that, tournaments. But today we're talking about the Fiendsmith Engraver, and you can use this card, discard it, and you get to add any Fiendsmith spell or trap card, and you're going to add Tracked likely, and once you get to Tracked, you get to add a Fabled Lord because that's a light fiend monster, and then you can discard it, which automatically summons it out and kicks off the entire strategy. And in the graveyard, it can summon itself out by, well, putting back a light fiend monster back into the deck and summoning itself out. And on top of that, it does have another effect, if for those of you who are paying close attention into the text box, which is that you can target a Fiendsmith equip you control and one monster on the field, and you can send them both to the graveyard, which means some of the equipped link monsters onto this card or wherever it's equipped to can be sent to the graveyard, and you can send away one of your opponent's monsters as well, which is fantastic. So it also acts as removal, and one of the key features about this card is that it is level 6, and if you merge this one with, say, Fiendsmith Lacrima, then you get 2 6s. You can either go into Beatrice and by overlaying the 2, or you can go to DDD Wave High King Caesar, which now can eat up 2 of your opponent's special summons. Alright, this is like a lot of danger, and not to mention that there's no restriction being added to you. So essentially, through a purely just a special summon line, you're gonna have access to multiple monsters. You can even climb into Appaloosa if you want to. Next, the card that you've been waiting for, Fiendsmith Track. This card is insane, especially if you play any sort of light fiend monster. What does it do? Add 1 light fiend monster from your deck to your hand. Wow, that's really, really generic and really good. Then discard 1 card. Oh, okay, well, likely your go-to monster is going to start with Fabled Lori. Not the Fabled Lori. The Fables are an entire beast entirely, but we're looking for fiends here. So Fabled Lori, this is a light fiend monster, which when it's discarded, guess what? It discards it by Tracked. It's going to summon itself out from the graveyard because it has a graveyard trigger, essentially turning this whole card into an emergency teleport for Fabled Lord, which is really good. Alright, it's already a searchable card because Fiendsmith Engraver can search for Tracked already, and we're at the step of putting Lori into the graveyard. But it's not just for Lori. If you're playing Magical Muskets, if you're going to be playing Majesty's Fiend, yes, you can search Majesty's Fiend with this card. Yeah, you can also get those cards and stun people out or kick off your entire strategy. So there's a lot going for this. Not to mention that it has a graveyard effect where you can banish it and perform a fusion summon of a Fiendsmith monster using cards in your hand or field. Alright, so this card, insanely powerful, gotta get it. Now that we've seen some of the starters, let's take a look at the fusion package and the combo pieces this deck has to offer. Starting off with Fiendsmith's Lacrima, requiring 2 light fiend monsters to fuse into this. It itself is of course a light fiend monster as well, but it's also level 6, same level as Fiendsmith Engraver, which means if you can keep both of them on the field, which is really easy, you're going to be able to overlay into any rank 6 of your choice. This is like one of the easy go-tos, because if this card is fusion summoned, you can target a light fiend monsters in your graveyard or banish, special summon it onto the field, or add it to your hand. So if you didn't use Engraver's effect somehow and it's in the graveyard, you can add it back to your hand. You can throw it back into the graveyard and add Tracked or any of your other Fiendsmith spell or trap cards, which is also very fantastic. Or if it's a Majesty's Fiend, which can't be special summoned, you can add that back to your hand and perform a tribute summon. There's a lot going for this card, and not to mention that there's also a burn base effect. You can do effect damage against your opponent. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you can shuffle another light fiend monster from your graveyard to your deck or extra deck and inflict 1200 damage to your opponent. So it can come in handy to shorten the range to hit your opponent with. And if you so choose to go into Beatrice with your rank 6 option, option, you can send Angel of Blue Tears into the graveyard, and from that card effect, you get to set onto the field any of your normal trap card from your deck, which gives you full access to the entire deck of normal trap cards. That's just one of the options you have. Now, this is the Fiendsmith boss monster. If you decide to give the Fiendsmith a little bit more center attention and summon out their boss monster, this is Fiendsmith's Desiree, a level 9 Light Fiend requiring Fiendsmith Engraver and 2 Light Fiend monster as the fusion recipe material. So what makes this card so fantastic? Well, on the field it definitely will have impact because it has an effect very similar to Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss, which is essentially a card negation on the field, except this one doesn't target, and you also hit multiple things. It's based off of the number of link ratings equipped to this card. So you can equip back some of your Fiendsmith Link monsters, which we will get into in a second, and once they're equipped onto it, you can combine all the link ratings on that, and that's up to the number of cards you can negate with this card. Because this card does not target, you always get to choose the best one, so the later in the chain link you activate this effect to negate stuff, the better. You could actually hit maybe even multiple cards in the chain, which is something that I don't think we've seen so far in Yu-Gi-Oh! So it's going to be a nice mix-up in terms of how we handle different types of chain links. Now, on top of that, if this card leaves the field, well, it comes with a nice little goodbye gift. First of all, you get to shuffle back one of your Light Fiend monsters, and they get to target a card on the field, and that also drags it along to the grave with you. So it sends away another problematic card that you probably have to answer. So that's why this card is definitely going to be impactful, so look out for this card. Moving on into the Link monsters, starting with Fiendsmith's Requiem. This is the Link 1 of the deck, and like most Link 1s, they're going to be very powerful at setting up engine, and this is no different. And if you can summon out this particular monster, you have access to essentially the entire Fiendsmith line. And if you start off with Fiendsmith Engraver right from the get-go, that means you've loaded your graveyard, so you're going to have the ability to generate multiple monsters onto the field and just diversify your play from there without committing your normal summon, and this card plays a very key pivotal role. So what does this card do? Well, essentially, if you manage to summon this card out with one Light Fiend monster, you can attribute it and summon out a Fiendsmith Engraver straight from the deck. Wow, it's very simple, and it's very diverse because just from doing that, you already put this card into the graveyard. It has a graveyard effect to activate, target a non-link Light Fiend monster, and equip this card to it. And if you're going to be going for the Engraver, obviously you have to send your opponent's monster to the graveyard effect to go with it. So naturally, just by going into this card, you can remove some of your opponent's monster. But also, if you're going to be combining this with other decks such as like Snake Eye and stuff like that, if this card comes back, it just acts as something that can pay cost for some of those Snake Eye effects as well. So I'm going to throw that in there just because it's something you can do. It's very powerful. And also, a Light Fiend monster isn't that hard to summon. You got, of course, the track, you've got the Engravers. What else are you looking for? You have the entirety of the Magical Muskets. So, what more are you asking for? Moving on to the Link 2, we have Fiendsmith's Sequence. This is a light Link 2 requiring 2 monsters, including a Light Fiend monster. And you know how powerful cards are when you link into a monster and they generate another monster to help you climb? Well, this is no different. In fact, it can help you climb into 2 additional monsters because this is Sequence, and during your main phase, you get to perform a fusion summon of a Fiend fusion monster using monsters in your graveyard to summon that monster out, which is very powerful because we already talked about Fiendsmith's Lacrima, which on summon summons back another monster from the graveyard, so that just generates 2 additional monsters, giving you enough to perform a Link 4 summon along the way. Or you can take the 2 monsters if they're both level 6. Lacrima's level 6, the Engraver's level 6. You can stack them on top and you can keep your play going. I think this engine is going to be really powerful, and if you do want to protect some of your own monsters, such as your Light Fiend monsters, you get to activate this card in the graveyard. So you can kind of consider the coffin looking monster as the links and the product of that monster as the fusion. That's kind of what they actually look like, and in this case, when you do equip it onto one of your monsters, well, that monster cannot be targeted by your opponent's card effects, so it can block stuff, and that's pretty pesky, like infinite impermanence, and provide you with a bit of a safety net, especially if you have this card equipped to Desiree, which allows you to negate 2 cards as well. So that's got something that's got going for you. Next, we are going back into the spells and traps. We have Fiendsmith Sanct. Essentially, this is a token generator for the deck. Essentially, it generates one token for you that is a light fiend monster, and you can only activate this card when you control no other monster, or all the monsters you control are light fiend monsters. So you can essentially just use this to bypass a normal summon and keep going. However, it does come with a clause where you cannot declare attacks for the rest of the turn. So there is a limitation, but essentially, if you're going to be going first, it doesn't really matter. And if your opponent does destroy one of your Fiendsmith monsters with a card effect, then you get to put this card back onto the field and set it onto the field. So it does come with a little recurrence. Essentially, it's a token generator. As for the one trap card we have, it's a total board wipe. So this Fiendsmith in Paradise, target one of your level 7 or higher light fiend monsters. Basically, everything else, they get sent to the graveyard except for that one card. So that's the only thing that doesn't get sent to the graveyard, which is great. Now, it also has a graveyard effect. So if you manage to keep your, say, your Desiree on the field and you need to load the graveyard with some negation-esque effect, well, if your opponent performs a special summon or you're in luck, you get to banish out this card and you get to send out one of your Fiendsmith monsters from your extra deck or deck into the graveyard, so you can send some of the link monsters. If you send the link, of course, you can equip it onto your Desiree, which really helps out in the long run. So those are some of the options you have, but these are the Fiendsmith monsters we're looking at. And that's all the Fiendsmith. I mean, we don't have to tell them. Okay, so I just got off a phone call with some very important people, and they said, hey, I'm not done. They sent me another card to share with you guys, and I'm sorry to disappoint you all. It's definitely not the card that you're thinking of, but hey, you know what? I don't get to share with you guys the Dragon of Pride and Soul, but instead I get to share with you this, the Link monster, Moon of the Closed Heaven. Okay, jokes aside, this is the card that you have been waiting for confirmation in the Infinite Forbidden, card number 098, Moon of the Closed Heaven. Now, what's so important about this card? It's just a Link 2. It's a little underworld goddess of the closed world. Yeah, it is. But the significance about this card is that it is essentially a generic, low-costing Link 2 monster that is light and fiend. And since anyone can make it, anyone can bridge into Fiendsmith by using 2 monsters, or if you have access to a Link 2, and that's going to shift the routes of many combos available. Before, it was a little bit more difficult to access the Fiendsmith package and the Fiendsmith strategy, but with this card, anyone can do it. Now, aside from the ability to go from Moon of the Closed Heaven into Fiendsmith Requiem, which will lead into the rest of the Fiendsmith cards, now you also have a card that, if you do put it onto the field, you can threaten Underworld Goddess of the Closed World against your opponent by simply activating the effect, targeting your opponent's card that this card points to, and now if you're going to be going into a Link 5 or higher monster, you can use that monster. And since Underworld Goddess can already use one of your opponent's monster, so you get to take out 2 of your opponent's monster with this, and you just use 2 of your own, which makes it to be a very cost-effective Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. So we're going to be breaking boards and get access to Fiendsmith. Break boards, get access to Fiendsmith. I don't know what more you're asking for here. You got the information confirmed, so let's go. So if you enjoyed that information, or even that last little bit, smash that thumbs up button for me, hit subscribe, ding that notification bell. You know, Fiendsmith, very powerful strategy, and I'm looking forward to comboing non-stop with this for the time being. And until next time, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV, and best of luck with your Infinite Forbidden polls.